Right. And so like I'm glad you brought that up because I had an interaction. I think it was a YouTube comment. It might have been someone on Twitter yesterday where they were like, you can't unleverage the quarterback basically. Where it was like, every system is quarterback centric. Like you eventually have to play NFL quarterback. And I was like, yes, but there are ways to make it easier. And I, of course, used a Kyle example because I think it's the best one in the league right now is like, how do you take the guy who is Mr. Irrelevant and make him into an MVP candidate? And the answer is not like he doesn't actually do anything. It's Kyle understands that Brock Purdy is extremely smart. And that's why he wanted him, by the way, in the draft. It wasn't an accident they drafted him. And so they put a ton on him mentally. Lots of formations, lots of motions. There's all these different personnel groupings. It's like, hey, man, you're going to have to study your ass off. But after the ball's snapped, it's going to be easy for you because we're going to use all this stuff to make it easier physically, even though there's a ton to do mentally. And I feel like that's the area where this system and the way it's designed. And by the way, there's also personnel discussions to be had here in terms of it, the way that the Eagles have made things easier for Jalen Hurts over the last couple of years is their offensive line's incredible. So he doesn't necessarily have to worry about pressure ever. Right. So there's different ways to go about it. But for the play calling, like schematic type of stuff, they have simplified this offense to the point that it is over simple. It's like, that's actually not training wheels. It actually is harder where it's like Aaron Rodgers could run this system because he sees through everything. Right. Rodgers notoriously just doesn't want a lot of motion, doesn't want a lot of stuff. He's like, let's line up and play football because I'm better at playing football than they are. Right. And at this point in his career, Sam Howell can't say that. And most quarterbacks can never say that. So do you actually give him more in order to make it easier on him? That is the kind of the question that I've had all year, and they have not ever been able to take that next step, and thus Sam is kind of staying where he's at, and the production is falling off because defenses seemingly have known that for weeks.
Yeah, and so I think San Fran is like an interesting example because I think there is some truth to what you're saying, but also Brock Purdy's playing pretty good football right now.
Yeah,
like
Brock's playing great football.
It's like he's elevating. I think 70% of the time Kyle's elevating, and then that 30% he's elevating. Mm-hmm. But I think another example, like to your point, I think that's a good example. But I can hear
Detroit to me is my favorite example because
Detroit,
Goff is,
Seattle is doing that. Cleveland with Joe Flacco, like there are teams, and when you watch those games, like what they do in terms of deleveraging, right? Like the term game manager, I think is thrown out like in a negative way, but I think it speaks to what this commenter is saying is you got to play NFL quarterback at some point. I don't have to play NFL quarterback all the time. Like when I think about hard situations for quarterbacks, it's like we're in the gun. It's 3rd and 7. I got a deal. How do I manage those situations to make them easier? And so like you mentioned the Kyle example, like I think about how they scheme stuff open and how they use play action pass to help guys out. So just as an example, right? Hard play action, right? We talked about this, and I think EB did this in the game. Like there's examples of this, but like, let's talk about that. Hard play action pass look, right? Those linebackers step up. There's a big void there, but how do we ensure that the corner's not going to get in the way, right? We're going to run Deebo Samuel on a go, and he's going to carry, and then George Kittle's going to run across the formation and be wide open with nobody around him. How many times have we watched a highlight of George just wide open in space? It's
right. Because he's George Kittle. Don't you know that he's important? Cover him, but you can't because you're covering everybody else.
It's because they've taken time and they've schemed stuff up, and Brock Purdy knows it. He feels comfortable with it. And so, for example, like on that dig to Terry, that's a good schemed up touch there. Like that should be an easy completion for Terry. But Sam, and this is something that someone I was talking to mentioned to me, and this is something you have to talk to Sam about, is you mentioned that he has not been super efficient from a play action pass standpoint. And one of the things I wonder about is how well he can see it from a play action pass standpoint. So like the throw's open, it's there. The window that EB has created with the pen is there. It's just, there's a little bit of pressure. He gets a little bit spooked and the ball's not out. So even though with the pen you seemingly elevated, the result isn't there. And so getting back to the leverage thing, it's like, how do you find opportunities to just limit those big time moments in the game? Like I think Seattle does a great job because they're super efficient at running the football, right? They've a lot of tight ends on the field. They're physical. It's like this exotic smash mouth thing that Detroit does where they're motioning tight ends around. They're moving guys around the formation. They're changing strength all the time, and they're putting the defense in a blender, and they're really efficient running the football. Like they've deleveraged Drew Lock. They've deleveraged Geno Smith through that element of the game. It doesn't need to be through the run game, but it is a feature of it, right? I look at Matthew Stafford and the LA Rams. Like, they rush for, what was it, 125 yards or something like that?
It was more than that, yeah.
And what they do, man, it's brilliant. It's just like, but those little wrinkles in the run game deleverage Matthew Stafford. Like, Matthew Stafford can deal. There's no doubt about it. But he doesn't need to deal every single play, because I don't want to put all my eggs in the quarterback basket. And so even though Matthew Stafford's playing some of the best football in the NFL at the quarterback position right now, Sean McVay understands that, hey, we got to take something off of him. And it's not just off of him, it's off the offensive line as well. So I think that's kind of like what we're alluding to here, is just there are ways to say to put him in a better spot. Like I like the example you gave, like where he's riding the bike himself, right? But you're right there with him holding the seat. I think that's exactly what you're saying. The training wheels aren't on because we want to run NFL offense. We want to do what we need to do. But I am helping you as much as you need to make sure this thing stays upright and we're going in the right direction.
Right. And so, but there also does get to a point in defense of Eric and in, if you want to call it criticism of Sam, where like eventually you got to do it. Right. And this is where, and it might not be even a criticism of Sam. Like, I mean, this is Tavita Pritchard's first time as an NFL quarterbacks coach. Like, who knows what kind of, how the process has gone. Like, I'm just naming names to say, like, we don't know where the blame actually goes. Right. But from a like identifying the process standpoint, watching the film standpoint, like, why aren't Sam's eyes going to that backside safety to double check that he doesn't need to throw the go to Terry before getting to the front side concept? Did Sam forget that that's what he's supposed to do because he's focused on the front side concept? Did they teach him, like, hey, man, just focus on this front side concept? It's too, like, we don't want to cloud your brain with that backside safety and you miss an opportunity because that's the way it's coached? Are they not focusing enough on, like, how he moves his eyes? Like, does Sam not have like that global understanding that, like, hey, I have to check this first, or did he just miss it? Like, there's like almost an infinite amount of possibilities of why this stuff is happening, but I think it's very clear that there isn't that like really high level understanding, and there's been, I think, I'm trying to think of the word. There's just like a lack of cohesion, I think is the best way to phrase it, between Sam and this offense, which is not to blame Sam or the offense. It's just a fact. Like, they haven't fit together very well. I think part of that, too, is going back to some of the things that he really needed to work on coming into the season, footwork and timing. This is a footwork and timing offense. And you've got a quarterback who, like, I watch him take the snap sometimes, and he kind of, like, freezes, and then he rushes the drop back. And you're like, that's not how that is supposed to look. And you watch Jacoby take his dropbacks, and it's like smoothly catch the snap, boom, 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 back foot hits, ball is out, or hitch, ball is out. But like, there is a rhythm to his eyes and his feet and the offense, and everything is married together. And I don't see that cohesion, to use that word again, with Sam. And the why is, I mean, it's important for them to know. I just think it's kind of impossible for us to know unless you've actually unlocked the answers, and now I've just rambled far too long.
No.
You've been sitting here with the knowledge the whole time.
No. But I do think that you mentioned the rhythm and timing, like that's a big part of it, and that's really hard to coach because it's like a feel, And I think in the NFL, that rhythm and timing becomes so much more important because everything, like you said, is kind of operating in such, like, the margin for error is so small. So if my feet are too fast and I'm waiting to throw, then my clock goes off and the receiver's not even in a position where he can catch the football. If I'm too slow, the receiver's open and I'm still holding on to the football. And then I think, when you watch Jacoby, just the rhythm that he, like you mentioned the rhythm. I'm in my drop, there's a rhythm. I've hitched in the same rhythm as the receivers coming out, right? And it wasn't like Jacoby was perfect. There was one time where he was trying to like work an attack concept and the tight end's over the ball, and he's trying to hold the hook player by looking at Curtis. And the hook player squeezes to Logan. It's not there. And he kind of double clutches to Logan, but gets back to Curtis. Like, that's the O-line wins that down for him, because it's, even though his rhythm and timing was off. So I'm not saying like Jacoby was perfect, but
sure,
that's something that you can tell at the moment Sam's having a hard time with. And I think the thing that's hard to like in the evaluation of Sam, because that's really what this conversation's about, is there are some things he's struggling with. There are some things all young quarterbacks struggle with. The thing that still gets me excited about Sam is his playmaking ability. Like we just mentioned that he misses the dig you know, to Terry, but he scrambles for a first down. So even though that's a bad play, like it's like kind of a minus, like he was able to elevate that and keep the offense on the field, right? There's the 3rd and 15 where he scrambles for 12 or 13 yards and gets you to a 4th and 2, right? We talked about the mesh concept where, you know, the back's running wide open, and I'm as a coach, I'm a little frustrated with that because of how I've set that.
The 4th down that he winds up scrambling and converts to Terry, Jonathan Williams is buck naked, open, just so open for a touchdown on a wheel route, but he makes a ridiculous play to Terry to convert a 4th down. How mad can you be?
Yeah, and so I think like what I would say is if I'm coaching this, I'm like, good job making the play, but just remember in this look with the back offset to your right and 53 in the A gap, and they're in man coverage here because you can tell it's man coverage, he has to cover him. He has to cover him. So when he doesn't leave with the back, I'm alerting that in my mind, right? Because that's the person that's going to match him. And so he's trying to hold a disguise. They don't get it communicated. It's essentially a coverage bust, right? Because as that linebacker is trying to late get to match the back, he gets picked by Logan Thomas, he gets picked by Curtis Samuel, and he's wide open. So as a coach, I'm saying, hey man, great job making this play, but I think you made it a little too hard on yourself. Just pre-snap, like what's your pre-snap read? And I think this is something that's really hard. The pre-snap stuff now in the NFL is harder than ever. Like, you know, even in me talking about the coverages, I'm like, looks like 6, could be man, maybe a match. You sent me
your notes. There's a lot of question marks on the coverage. And that's what happens with zone match. And like Raheem Morris is one of the best guys in the league at coaching this stuff up, the Rams defensive coordinator. And it looks messy because it starts as one thing and kind of morphs into something else. It's really hard, which makes the rules of like, if it's 6 throw here, if it's 3 throw here, you don't know what it is. And that, you know, I would, again, and anybody who's newer to the podcast, if you want to hear more about this, go back to the summer in our archive and or just search the Matt Ryan podcast, because Matt talked about this, of how hard it became by the end of his career to read coverage, and you kind of had to start reading space. And there were times that he made great plays having no idea what coverage he just threw into.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that gets me is like, can you ensure the space as a coordinator, right, to help him out, right? I think it's what we're ultimately getting at is, can you help him with that process as opposed to just being like, hey, man, we're going to pre-snap read this, and you're going to have to figure it out. So back to the Sam thing, there are those plays. The touchdown, I think, is a great play design. You know, the one to is it to Curtis?
It's Curtis, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great play design. It's curl, you know, so you're going to run out, you're going to run like a curl route. Everyone knows a curl button hook, maybe some people call it. 12 yards sit. The cover 3 player is going to attach to that. You're going to inside stem, and you're going to run a deep corner, and you're running a corner on a safety, and it's wide open. And I love that play. It's a great play call, great situation, great understanding by EB. But talk about ensuring space. Like it's an easy read. Like second that guy attaches to the button hook, to the curl, I'm going to throw. I know I'm throwing the pylon. Like there's nobody out there to cover it. So I just love that opportunity. And again, Sam does that stuff pretty consistently, but there were times definitely where you're like, he doesn't know the coverage. He's a little bit rattled. He's leaving clean pockets. Like, and that's the thing that you're dealing with, because I do think you see the potential. And I think, you know, we always make the Jalen Hurts comparison. There were times watching Jalen Hurts where I thought this is a non-tenable solution. It's a non-tenable solution for him playing NFL quarterback. He's throwing 3 picks. Nothing's on schedule. He's running into sacks. But he got better. And I think you've seen enough of Sam being Sam in terms of arm talent, because like his arm talent, in my opinion, is way better than Jalen Hurts. His release is way better. And you've seen the competitive moxie that he brings. So, you know, year 2 development. And so that's where like everyone talks about, oh, do we need to draft a quarterback? Do we need to make a move for agency? I think you're probably okay. This game doesn't, after watching the All-22, doesn't get me off of him just yet. I think there's enough there. But I think it's kind of to your point. It's like, he needs a much more quarterback friendly system and environment, right? It's not just a system. It's not just a coordinator thing. It's like he needs an elite offensive line. He probably needs a great tight end to throw to. Like those things helped Jalen as much as anything. Well, I think, you know, even looking at Drew Lock, like watch that game last night, and like in crunch time, it's like, I've got guys that are better than your guys, and we're going to win. Like DK Metcalf's going to make a great play here. And we got Jackson Smith and Jigba making a huge play, winning a man-to-man situation. And I think Terry has that ability. I think Jahan's had that ability, but, you know, maximizing those guys in this offense is also something, you know, you'd like to see a little bit more of, or maybe featuring them a little bit more. Because I think the offense has given them opportunities, and Sam has not always hit on those opportunities. And again, that's in every offense. That's not just this offense with Sam. Like that happens frequently. Is the quarterbacks miss stuff. They're not on the same page with the receivers. It is a new offense. But yeah, so I think like it hasn't got me off him yet, but I do think it shows you that he's a work in progress. He's a developmental piece. And again, like I think he's got it, but you're gonna have to deal with some growing pains with it.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, or one of the things that Jalen has on Sam is accuracy. He was one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the country in college at both Alabama and at Oklahoma. And he carried that, wasn't always going the right place, whatever. But his accuracy has always been a huge boon for him. And Sam, that has been an issue at times. So I think the footwork, the accuracy are two of the biggest questions about how coming out of college. Those things are still question marks right now. He's still a young player. He's growing, and we'll see based off how he performs in these final 3 games and what the next regime wants to do, whether that's enough to be the quarterback in 2024. Anything else on the offense we want to get to before we quickly buzz through the defense?
No, I mean, unless there's other plays you want to go over, but I think that's good.
No, I mean, we can talk later in the week about the offensive line and some of that kind of stuff. But I think that was the most 30 minutes of quarterback talk is exactly what the people ordered here on the Film Review Pod.